Audit Committee, so I'll start with any apologies.
No apologies have been received, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any declarations of interest in relation to items on today's agenda? Nope, seeing shaking of heads, so I'll take that as a no. Can we move on then to the minute of our last committee meeting, which was 23rd September? I'll go through it first for accuracy. So what in the papers is page 3, page 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, can we take that then as an accurate record? Okay, does anyone have any matters arising to raise that won't come up elsewhere in today's agenda? Nope, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'll move on to item 4 then, which is the Strategic Risk Register. Stephen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 4, Strategic Risk Register. There are no new risks have been added to the register since we last met as an audit committee back in September. The main core element of the report is section 4. And in 4.1, we see that there are 9 active strategic risks that have been identified for the current year. 8 are considered as high risk and 1 is a medium risk. There's been no change in status for 7 of the risks reported, but the future target scores, not the current score, but the future target score for the capacity and infrastructure risk and the commissioning risk have both increased to reflect the very challenging current market employment conditions and the cost of living concerns. You will see in the table that both those risks that I've just referred to have got a red arrow in the change column, and the key below notes that that simply designates that for both those risks there has been a risk deterioration, and as I say, that is the future control score that is changed. Section 4.2 notes that the detailed risk register is provided within Appendix 1, and that appendix should be read in conjunction with the risk assessment scoring matrix, which can be found at Appendix 2. The bullet points in 4.3 just note some of the key considerations that we have considered in reaching the conclusions, both for the table and within the detailed risk register. And then finally, at section 4.4, it notes that the table highlights the future risk score was amended for 2 of the 9 risks due to the current economic, workforce and financial pressures within the wider system. Those wider pressures are unlikely to change in the short term, and the future risk score now reflects that uncertainty. Equally though, within Appendix 1, the detailed strategic risk register, the untreated risk score is shown there as if there had been no controls in place, and we have also reviewed those untreated scores in light of that same current operating environment. So a very quick canter through the report. There's a couple of things not mentioned in the report that I'll just highlight just now, if that's okay. The last of the risks, strategic risk 9, relates to primary care sustainability. What we have in front of us is a more dated version. There is an update to what we effectively do is we mirror what goes to the NHS board. They lead on the primary care risk, and we mirror their report. There is an updated risk 9, or it won't be risk 9 in their register certainly, but there is an updated risk going to the board, I believe sometime in December, and we will reflect that on our next iteration. Probably with hindsight, we should have just taken that information as soon as we knew about it and put it in our risk register too, but have allowed that flow to go to the board first of all and then come to us. So there will be very shortly an update to the primary care risk. And the only other comment I would make on the report is one that Tony has made reference to in the past. Tony suggested that it would be worthwhile considering having some review dates for each of the 9 strategic risks. and that's certainly something that we want to look at. I'm currently in discussions with the risk management teams, both within the NHS Forth Valley and Falkirk Council, looking at how we can further develop the risk register and make it more robust, the actions that we need to take in a sort of organised process methodology. And I think beyond that, we can then add in target risk review dates for each of the 9 individual risks. I'll stop at that and I'll leave it with you, Chair, if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a few times about bringing the various risk registers into more common formats so that they are all kind of linked across the health and social care system. So that would make sense. Tony, can I bring you in?
Yeah, just for clarity, and for those that don't remember the conversation, the particular issue was about having a target date for the target risk, and I think they're actually, you know, some of them are moved to reflect circumstances. But the idea is, and it's perhaps not so much an issue with this risk register, but it's a comment I've made across a range of clients, where you get a medium, and how do you judge whether that medium is sensible? And frankly, it might not be in the next 12 months, and hopefully it will be in 3 years' time when things get better. So it's about just making sure that the timescale is one that you can use. And with all risk registers, they're a means to an end, not an end in themselves. So it's about which timescale is the most meaningful for you as an audit committee and for managers to be able to actually manage the risk. And there's probably I'm kind of intrigued at the idea that the health board's leading on the primary care risk, because obviously it's a delegated function. But certainly I'll make the comment to the health board then that, because a lot of these risks are framed in terms of the primary care, you know, the GP contract, if you like. And obviously it's much wider than that. We've done a big piece of work in Tayside, and it's almost getting the main. So the risk is about the, let me say it. So the risk is about the primary care improvement plan, which is largely kind of GP, or can be largely GP led. So it's about, so the primary care improvement plan is the means to control the risk. It's not the risk itself, and that's a comment made elsewhere. But I'll work with that through the health board, because, you know, obviously we have the 8 layers on there. The important thing is whether we can deliver the services. That's the key element of the risk, and the plan is just a means of hopefully making sure we can, albeit there's a whole range of other people and other factors involved normally that come into play there. That's all, but yeah, I'll deal with that through the health board.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Patricia, did you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, we're obviously in a changing environment in relation to that, and the health board will continue to have the responsibility of the contracting arrangements, but they will be passing over to this partnership in the new year. But we certainly can reframe that, and we'll have a discussion with colleagues in NHS about the role in relation to that risk. Tony makes a good point. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that circumstances change, so the framing of the risk and possibly some of the controls would change as well. So we'll leave that for a future discussion. Fiona.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose my question in relation to the risk register is, given the pressures across both partners, currently with the NHS, but obviously the council's budget setting process, and I suppose it was just about a pace of updating of the risk register, because there are some things obviously we might not know at the moment, but may potentially be faster moving in terms of a risk being in place, or actually an action on a risk that would reduce it. So it was just a general question on that.
Stephen.
Thank you. Yes. So the risk register does come to this audit committee, every audit committee, and obviously that's only quarterly, and we've got our next expected statement from Scottish Government will be in a couple of weeks' time, 15th of December. So your point is very valid that, you know, the circumstance could change rapidly just within the next couple of weeks. We also take the risk register though to the strategic leadership team. And that's that's a standing item there as well. So out with the committee assurance, there is also the senior management review of the risk register on a regular basis, and beyond that, I guess it's my bread and butter to make sure that we manage the financial position as best we can. So we will be reacting on a regular basis. I'm just thinking aloud now, Councillor Colley, but there is also, Patricia has our delegated authority, and I'm sure if there were any urgent pressing issues where we needed to raise any matters, then we have the regular meetings with the chair and the vice chair for the IJB. So if there were any significant changes to the risk register, I'm sure we could take that there too, out with the committee process. So hopefully that gives some assurance.
Okay, any further questions or points on the risk register? Okay, can we note that then as it stands with those increased target risks and some future actions there that will come back to committee in due course? Okay, item 5 then is the internal audit progress report. Stephen, are you introducing that, or is that Tony?
Tony, I'm happy just to pass that straight over to yourself, if that's okay.
I was about to dive in. You still got your hand up, Stephen. I was like, it does vary actually. Some work on the council basis, and as chief internal auditor, I have to wait for the CFO to do that. Others we just do it normally. But anyway, as you'll see, it's not the most exciting progress report yet, because the progress is deferred to towards the end of the year for good reason. The strategic plan, obviously we want to do that audit when we've got something to look at, when we've got something that we can add value. So we've shared the audit questionnaire with the IJB, but we'll be running through that fairly soon, and that is something we've run elsewhere. We've already come out with comment on the South Lanarkshire IJB strategic commissioning plan, so we've run that programme in quite a few places, and it's also been run by, we shared it with our local authority colleagues, so it's also being run in Stirling Glax. So I think that's helpful as well, so that you know that your partner bodies kind of operate into the same set of questions. But we had the discussion, and it was decided we'd back end that, just because of the way that the timing of the strategic plan, and that will start fairly soon. The other one, the big one, which will be a big piece of work for Stephen, unfortunately, is what we call in the ICE, and that is the holistic overview of the internal controls. And Gordon, you'll be familiar with that, and you're about to see Forth Valleys fairly soon, which will be interesting this year, because they've all, they're perhaps not them. I've already done a couple for other health board clients, and they're probably not the most optimistic we've ever been in terms of the general environment. But that work will take place soon. And the reason we're doing it early, as I think we explained in the plan, is it's quite a lot of work to be done. And also, the first time it's done, you need a wee bit of time to, if there's anything needs sorting before year end. So that's why we're doing it early. Stephen's had the questionnaire, but we'll be coming along and looking for answers fairly soon, and working through that and going through the papers, and that report will be ready in time. Probably by the time it gets to this committee, the remedial action before year end won't be able to be taken, but we'll go through the process early enough that if there's any kind of easy hits, we'll get those done in time for year end. So nothing as yet, but it's all lined up and we're raring to go, and the next audit committee should have 2 reports for you.
Okay, yep, that makes perfect sense on the timing, Tony. Thank you. Any questions or comments, colleagues? Roger?
Thanks, very sorry about this. Having said last audit committee that I was impressed with the language used, and I could understand it. Just a couple of points during these ones. I'm sure they're very minor one. In the appendix 1, right at the top there, it says audit universe, and I wasn't quite sure what that didn't make any sense to me. Sorry about being pedantic about that. Could somebody explain?
Sorry, the audit universe, hopefully makes sense in context. So the audit universe is the whole list of things that we could audit. And it comes from a model that we used to use pre-COVID. So probably the language should have changed, but with all these things, you don't always change it when circumstances change. And for those clients that used to get the old plan, so we used to have these lovely massive spreadsheets, and we'd work out from that how that related to your risk register, and we'd have a nice 5-year plan. And you could be assured that over the cycle, and this was probably more appropriate for say larger clients like the health boards, where you had big multi-100-day plans, you could see that over the cycle, over the 5-year cycle, we were covering everything, and we'd cover it appropriate to risk, and we used the Pareto principle and all sorts of wonderful things. And unfortunately, post-COVID, that's not the end we're in, because we're dealing with a quite rapidly changing risk profile, and also assurances that we gave a few years ago don't have the meaning. So in the good old days, and for about 20 years, you know, you could audit something and the world didn't change that much, and that assurance still helped. That's not the environment we're in, so it's much more fast moving. But I'm afraid we're still using old language. But you'll be getting a new chief internal auditor next year. He'll be using new shiny language and not outdated relics of a bygone past. But yeah, apologies for that. But that's what an audit universe is. It's the list of everything we could audit if we so wanted. And who knows, maybe next year we'll get back to the good days of massive spreadsheets and entire universes that we can see the coverage of. But for the moment, it doesn't have a lot of meaning, unfortunately. Apologies.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Yeah, I'm always a big fan of spreadsheets. So yes, I think you're right. I mean, the pace of change, I think, will continue to be fairly high for a few years, which probably isn't a good thing because it's changing in not the best direction. But that's where we are, and we need to do our best to cope with it. Okay, if there's nothing else on item 5, I'll move on to item 6 then, which is the National Audit Report and Inspection Overview. I think this one is you, Stephen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we have 6 reports that have been published since the last meeting. 4 of them have come from Audit Scotland, 1 from the Accounts Commission and 1 by the Care Inspectorate. The Section 4 is the main part of the report again, so I'll just skip straight to that. We have a table in Section 4.1 that lists the 5 non-inspection reports, and below that, and there's a link within the table to each of the source documents, and then hopefully the paragraphs 4.2 through to 4.6 give a helpful summary and overview of each of those individual reports, should you wish to review them in more detail. The first one of them is the National Fraud Initiative in Scotland in 2022, and we will see that this is an update from the previous exercise, which was run back in 2018-2019. It identifies outcomes valued at £14.9 million, which is 400,000 lower than the previous exercise. The report itself does caveat what that means. It isn't definitive, so it does say that it could be due to less fraud and error, but it could be due to more improved, stronger controls, or it could also be due to data differences. So it gives some form of limited assurance, is what I would say, rather than a definitive assurance. Having fewer outcomes does provide some assurance. I think the key, though, or one of the keys, is that just by participating in the National Fraud Initiative, there is the benefit of there being a deterrent effect. Employees and anyone that engages with organisations is aware that the data is cross-matched across different parts of the public sector in Scotland, so it may be a deterrent to fraud. So that's the first one. The Audit Scotland report, Scotland's Council approach to addressing climate change, notes some big differences in the targets that individual councils have set. And I would just refer to that last sentence that, you know, the report also highlights that Falkirk Council is one of 9 councils that has set a net zero target for its own emissions by 2030. The briefing, the next one's briefing tackling child poverty, and after that, the internal audit report entitled Annual Diversity Report 2021-22 is Audit Scotland's internal audit diversity report, showing how they revealing their diversity statistics and how they tackle the diversity challenges within the workplace. Finally, section 4.6, the last summary is radical action needed on data, and that notes that inequality is on the rise. There's an ageing population, which is placing increasing pressure on health and care services. We have the cost of living crisis, and that's putting a strain on household budgets. We've got the climate emergency, and so we are really in a period of demanding unprecedented change, and data becomes absolutely critical to understand where we are and where we need to be in future. It kind of ties in neatly with Councillor Colley's point on the very first report about how we need to react quickly and we need to have accurate and timely data. The last part of the report, section 5, is the inspection report, which is really just noted for audits awareness. The report will separately be presented to the Clinical and Care Governance Committee. And I will stop at that and pass back and ask if there's any questions. Thank you.
Okay, any questions then? Fiona?
Probably one's a comment and the other's a question. I suppose the briefing around tackling child poverty. I mean, obviously the primary part of that will be within the local authority as a partner, but in relation to children's services. But I suppose it's is there anything? I guess, is there anything that we need to have cognizance of in relation to almost the whole family approach and dealing with the health and well-being of adults? And the second point is around the radical action needed on data. And I did look at the data strategy on health and social care when it came out, and is it likely to throw up anything that's going to have significant impacts in terms of additional capacity or resource needed to support any changes within the IGIB specifically?
So in terms of the Tackling Child Poverty report, the main focus I would suggest from the report was actually how Scottish Government has performed so far. And again, the report was to some extent inconclusive. It noted that we were only partway through a period. But as you say, that it does also, probably the key highlight is that joined up working between all the public bodies. So absolutely, the IGIB has although we are adult services, we still have a part to play because children don't sit in isolation, they're part of a family unit. So we absolutely have a part to play there too. In terms of the data challenges and whether that will present capacity challenges for us, arguably it could. In many ways, actually having the right data should inform our decisions even better and actually make us more effective. So the reports that Patricia has previously taken to the IGIB board, who have highlighted that we do have capacity challenges just now, where we're looking to introduce additional posts into the management team, particularly around performance management and project management, then I think actually any developments in terms of data strategy could be helpful for us, and with our additional capacity, it's a double positive.
Okay, yeah, better data and better targeting, I think, is going to be important, especially as resources get tighter, isn't it? Tony, you've referred to another Audit Scotland report, which I think just came out last week or the week before, so probably just missed the cut-off for this committee.
Guys, just to add to the general air of doom just before Christmas, I thought we weren't quite cheerful. I mean, obviously it's just a timing issue, but I felt that one was kind of relevant to the conversation we just had. But I'm not sure there's anything in there anyone isn't fully aware of. But it just adds, and we love the NHS, and yeah. So it's just part of that overall picture we just need to be aware of. I don't think it's for discussion now, but it's just in case anyone was feeling overly cheerful, that'll just correct the mood.
No, I think we're aware of the way finances are going, and Stephen's already referred to the statement from well, it'll be the Deputy First Minister in a couple of weeks, so that will give us a clearer idea of next year's budgets. Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. It was just to highlight that if we're live streaming this, I don't know if anyone will be able to see the chat. So it was just to mention that Tony has put in the chat that there is a more recent audit publication. It was published on the 17th of November, if you click the link, and the publication is a briefing on Scotland's public finances, challenges and risks. And as I say, 17th of November, so that would have missed the cut-off for us preparing reports for today. Thank you.
So that's available from Audit Scotland website if anyone wants to read the full report. Okay, if there's nothing else in item 6, then I'll move on to item 7, which is the committee governance report. Stephen?
Thank you. I think David's going to lead on this one. David?
Oh, sorry, Dave.
Is that okay?
Yep, I'm fine with that. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephen. So the purpose of this report is to propose a programme of meetings for the committee and an indicative forward planner for 2023. So as we'll all be aware, sitting on Audit Committee, the meetings are arranged to align with the various statutory deadlines in respect of the annual account process and to ensure all audit plans, associated progress reports and annual assurance statements are considered at an appropriate stage in the financial year. With the exception of the 17th of March, which was feedback from the Chair pre-agenda, the proposed meeting dates for 2023 starting at 9:30 a.m. are the 16th of June, 15th September and 17th November. Our first meeting on the 17th of March will start at 2 p.m. As you'll see attached as an appendix, we have a draft forward planner for the forthcoming year. This plan summarises the work of the Audit Committee over the forthcoming year in a bid to ensure the key timescales are met and that any associated training development needs of the committee can be identified at an early stage. This forward planner may be subject to change and reports will be added to it as we go through the year, so it is a live document. In terms of our meeting arrangements for 2023, as you'll be aware, the board made a decision at its meeting on the 18th of November that we were going to test out a hybrid format for meetings for our Q1 meetings. So that includes the board and its 2 committees, and Forth Valley College is the most appropriate venue for that. So the first meeting will be taking place at Forth Valley College on a hybrid basis, and this policy will be reviewed by the board as and when appropriate. And in terms of that, an equality and poverty impact assessment was carried out and this was considered by the board. So I think that's all from me, Chair, and I'll pass it on back to you. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Dave. Yep, planner seems fine to me. Can I just confirm, Tony, the audit timescale for next year or for 2023? So I think are we back to normal timescales, having had kind of extensions over the COVID period?
I can only answer that for us, I'm afraid, because obviously, I mean, as we can see, there's no external audit team. So the delays, generally speaking, weren't from us. We did our bit. It was the externals. And all I can say at the moment is across the patch, they've been late being appointed. So you would normally have them here by now, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and telling you all about themselves and what they're going to do and when. So I can't answer. I can tell you we'll be ready on time. We'll be ready for June. I can't tell you about our external colleagues. Just on that subject, by the way, just in terms, I'm not sure if I've always been the planner, but it's normally good practice to have a private meeting with the audit committee what you normally say right lot, but it's good practice just in case you did have anything to say, and actually to have that scheduled in at some point. So I don't know if it'd be worth scheduling that in at some point. You'd normally have that with the internal and external auditors. But yeah, as far as it's concerned, I've not even got any general indications, because very few of my health board or RJB clients have had their external auditors roll up to the audit committees yet. And the ones that have been quite non-committal. They've used words like try and do our best, which maybe the best they can do, but I mean, they've all been appointed late, which doesn't bode startlingly well. And I know that some of them are still kind of finishing the council audits quite recently, which probably means they're pushed back. So the honest answer is I can't answer for them. I don't think it's guaranteed. I can tell you we'll have our stuff ready on time for June. So that's all we can do.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I'm aware from other places that handovers haven't taken place yet from old external auditors to new, and obviously there is a changeover kind of right across the public sector. So all firms are involved both in handing over and being handed over to, which is taking a bit of time. Stephen?
It was just to back up what Tony said. We haven't actually had any contact with our new auditors yet. Our new auditor ought to be Audit Scotland themselves, rather than one of the private companies. But that we haven't had any engagement so far with them. There hasn't been any contact. I know that Scott Urquhart recently has spoken to his auditors. He's not sure who NHS Forth Valley's with. It's certainly not Audit Scotland, but he had to go out his way to make that contact, and that kind of backs up what Tony's saying as well, that perhaps they are still working on legacy audits at the same time. So the dates that we've got are our best current estimates without that dialogue with the auditors. If there was a need to change things, there is probably some scope. I'm thinking more of the September date. We would perhaps need to look at a different time for the committee. We would potentially instead look to the full IJB board meeting rather than the audit committee if necessary. So we have thought about the contingency arrangements, but at this stage that's our best guess of when things ought to happen, and I for one certainly expect us to be reverting back to our normal year-end audit timetable in future. Thank you.
Okay, that makes sense, Stephen. Thank you. So can we approve these dates subject to discussion with new new external auditors? Sorry, get my terminology right. And acknowledging that there may need to be some change or may not, but we'll see when we've had those discussions. So can we approve the dates for now? Okay, thank you, folks. Item 8 then is governance statement improvement actions.
That's back to me, thank you. So it's a revised format for the report. As usual, it's one of our standing items. The report provides an update on the progress to implement a range of improvement actions that have been identified through the annual governance statement and from various internal and external audit recommendations. This will be the first report that also incorporates those actions which came from the 2021-22 annual accounts external audit. So the main thrust of the report is section 4 again. In this, we see that improvement actions have now been grouped into 4 broad categories. They're listed in the bullet points with additional detail contained in Appendix 1. So we've got the progress with the integration scheme and the MSG self-assessment as the first grouping. We've got the SIPFA Financial Management Code as number 2, the self-assessment of this committee, the audit committee, against good practice principles, which is one of our external audit recommendations, as the third grouping, and finally we've grouped together the other internal and external audit reports. We'll recall that previously we had a number of chronologically listed improvement actions, and as a result of that we often saw repetition of the words integration scheme. So hopefully the audit committee will be happy with this new format within Appendix 1. For each of these broad categories, and I'm on to section 4.2 here, we have incorporated a RAG status. This is in respect of target completion date, and where we're suggesting it's green, that indicates that expected completion is in line with original timescales. Amber would indicate some slippage in the target completion date, while red would indicate significant slippage in the target completion date. We are mindful that it's very easy on a report just to change dates and lose track of when we originally planned to complete a piece of work. So hopefully with this RAG status, we thought that gives some increased visibility to changes to those target completion dates and improves our reporting to the audit committee. Overall, there has been good progress recently with the risk management action plan, and there have been further meetings to progress the integration scheme actions. And as Patricia alluded to earlier in the meeting, we are currently looking at both mental health and primary care transfers to the relevant integration joint board, hopefully by the turn of the year. So things are moving well. For some other areas, though, there has been limited or no progress, and that's been linked to capacity challenges, and perhaps also while we're awaiting completion of associated tasks from elsewhere. And just the final point, 4.3 there, is just, and I've already discussed it today, noting that the management team are currently progressing options to address capacity challenges in what remains a challenging operating environment. I won't refer to anything in particular within the appendix. Hopefully that's fairly self-explanatory. You could argue that for the first category there, the progress with the integration scheme, with a revised target date of 2023, you could argue that that RAG rate should be red rather than amber, but we've taken a balanced collective view there because a number of actions have been completed and some will be completed shortly. So while perhaps in terms of overall integration, we'd expected everything to be done by now, there has been lots of progress, so we didn't feel that it should be red for the timeline for that one, and we've put it in as amber within the report. And that's all I will say about this report. I'll pass it back to the chair and for any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I found the revised format very helpful and very much easier to read and very much easier to track where there is progress and perhaps where some further attention is needed, which is really useful. The one element I would pull out is the risk sharing agreement. I know that is a priority, and I know it was mentioned at board meeting of the health board just the other day as a priority as well. So hopefully we will see some action on that very shortly. Any other questions or points, colleagues? No, we're happy to accept that report then. Thank you. And finally, item 9 is our terms of reference.
It feels like an anticlimax with this report because it's very much a short report. So there is a requirement for us to review our terms of reference annually, and this report is essentially highlighting that we've reviewed our terms of reference, and while we have reviewed them, we haven't suggested any changes. So they were reviewed last year on the 3rd of December. We're now reviewing them roughly a year later. So we're complying with the annual review basis, but there are no changes proposed. So there's not a lot I can say about the report. So I will just stop at that and pass back. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Stephen. No, always good practice to review annually, and I have no problem at all with short reports. Does anyone have any questions or comments then, or are we happy to agree that the terms of reference remain unchanged? Yep, I'm seeing nods, so everyone is happy with that. Okay, that brings us to the end of the agenda then. Does anyone have any other business to raise today? Nope, I'm seeing shakes of heads. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for all the reports and inputs. Some actions there to take forward, but generally some good progress as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.